Okay, let's dive into one of the most famous dinosaurs of all time, the triceratops. I mean, you know it the second you see it, right? But what do we actually know about this armored giant? Well, there's a lot more to the story than you might think.
So, to start, we have to go way back. We're talking 66 million years ago, to the very end of the late Cretaceous period. This was literally the final act for the age of dinosaurs, a world that was vibrant and full of life, but, it was also on the brink of a massive change.
And get this, in that world, Triceratops had a pretty famous neighbor. It was walking the exact same floodplains and forests as the most legendary predator we've ever known, the one and only Tyrannosaurus rex.
Yeah, that classic showdown has been in our imaginations forever, right? But what was this creature really like when it wasn't busy staring down a T-Rex? Let's get into it and really break down this incredible fortress of bone and the mysteries it's still holding on to. First things first, if you want to understand the Triceratops, you have to know where it lived. And that place is the legendary Hell Creek Formation. It's this incredible fossil-rich area that today covers parts of Montana, Wyoming, and both of the Dakotas. All right, now for the good stuff, the anatomy. What exactly made Triceratops the absolute heavyweight champion of the Cretaceous? Believe me, it was so much more than just those three iconic horns. I mean, just the sheer scale of this animal is hard to wrap your head around. It could weigh up to 12 metric tons. To put that in perspective, that is heavier than the biggest land animal alive today, the African elephant. This thing was an absolute tank.
And it was long, too. From its beak to the tip of its tail, it could stretch up to 9 meters. Just try to picture that, a living, breathing creature about the length of a school bus, but built like a walking fortress.
And that frill, that incredible bony shield at the back of its head, could be 2 meters long all by itself. That's taller than most adult humans. The head decoration alone was bigger than a person. It's just wild. And this is how it all came together. Its skull was enormous. It made up a full third of its entire body length. Up front, it had this powerful, sharp beak, perfect for snipping off tough plants. And behind that beak, it had up to 800 teeth that were constantly replacing themselves. On top of that, it had a reinforced spine and 4 super thick legs to hold it all up. Truly a fortress of bone.
But here's where it gets really cool. Triceratops wasn't just one static animal. We've actually found 2 different species that give us a glimpse of evolution in action. The older one, Triceratops horridus, had a shorter nose horn and long brow horns that faced forward. But over thousands of years, it looks like it evolved into Triceratops process, which had a longer nose horn and shorter brow horns that curved upwards. It's like having a perfect little snapshot of evolution.
So how did we even find out about this creature in the first place? Well, the story is actually a perfect example of how science works. It's messy, and it all started with a pretty funny mistake. It all kicked off in 1887. A pair of huge horns gets sent to this famous paleontologist, Othniel Charles Marsh. And his first thought, oh, this must be from some kind of giant ancient bison. It's an honest mistake, I guess. But it wasn't until a year later when a much more complete skull turned up that he saw the third horn and realized, oh, wait a minute, this is something totally new. So Marsh gave it that legendary name, Triceratops horridus. Now, it sounds super dramatic, but horridus in Latin doesn't really mean horrible. It's closer to rough or bristling. He was probably just describing the rugged texture of the fossil itself. Still, what a name for a legendary animal, right? But even with complete skeletons, some of the biggest questions about Triceratops are still up for debate. At this point, it's not about what it looked like, but more about how it actually lived.
And this is the big one. This question has had scientists guessing for more than 100 years. You see these giant horns, you see that massive frill, and your brain immediately goes to one thing: combat. But is that the full picture?
Look, we all love the idea of 2 Triceratops locking horns in some epic battle, but the fossil evidence just doesn't really back it up. We don't see a lot of combat wounds on their skulls, so what if all that headgear wasn't for fighting, but for showing off? The thinking now is that it was more like a giant billboard for attracting mates or recognizing their own species. Can you imagine that frill, not as a weapon, but as this big, brightly colored display? Okay, another massive debate. Their social life. We always see them in movies traveling in these gigantic herds, thundering across the plains like buffalo. But is there any real evidence for that? Well, the clues we have are really interesting, but they're few and far between.
There's this one bone bed where a few individuals were found together, which could point to a family group. And another fossil has a healed tail injury that looks like it might have been stepped on by another triceratops. But honestly, that's about it. So for now, the idea of these vast, thundering herds is still mostly a mystery.
So let's zoom out one more time and put Triceratops back into its world. Because it wasn't just another dinosaur living in Hell Creek. In a lot of ways, it was Hell Creek.
And this right here shows you just how dominant it was. This is absolutely mind-blowing. But fossils tell us that Triceratops made up about 5/6 of all the large dinosaur life in its environment. 5 out of every 6 big dinosaurs was a Triceratops. They weren't just successful, they were the undisputed kings of the Cretaceous plains. But of course, it wasn't alone. It shared its world with a whole cast of famous creatures. You had its main nemesis, T-Rex. It was eating plants alongside the armored Ankylosaurus and the duck-billed Edmontosaurus. You had smaller dinosaurs like raptors running around, and these massive pterosaurs like Quetzalcoatlus soaring way up overhead. What a world!
But that entire vibrant world was basically living on borrowed time. When that asteroid hit, everything changed in the blink of an eye. The sky went dark with ash, blocking out the sun. The plants, the food source for Triceratops, all withered and died, and the whole food chain just collapsed. As one of the very last dinosaurs, Triceratops was there to witness the end of everything before it vanished too.
The story of Triceratops is just incredible. It's a story of success, of really complex biology, and in the end of tragedy. It was the king of its world, right up until that world ceased to exist. But paleontologists are digging in Hell Creek every single day, which just leaves you with one final thought. What other secrets about this armored giant are still buried out there, just waiting for us to find them?